The EU foreign policy chief warns the Middle East is on the verge of a regional war. Croatia's ruling conservatives win at the polls but will need support from far-right groups to form a government.
EU leaders have pledged to meet Ukraine's urgent defense needs as Russia ramps up its offensive across the country.
The EU foreign policy chief Josep Borrell has warned the Middle East is on the verge of regional war. He was speaking on the Italian resort island of Capri, where G7 foreign ministers are meeting to discuss the conflicts in Gaza and Ukraine.
We have to ask Israel for a restrained answer to the Iranian attack. We cannot escalate. We cannot go step by step, answering every time higher to a regional war. I don't want to exaggerate, but we are on the edge of a war, a regional war in the Middle East.
I don't think any other country in the world.
Ministers are also discussing the two-year war in Ukraine, with Borrell urging Western leaders to speed up military aid to Kyiv. A call repeated by US Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
The United States of America.
It is urgent that all of the friends and supporters of Ukraine maximize their efforts to provide with Ukraine with what it needs to continue to effectively defend itself against this Russian aggression.
The US and several European countries are discussing proposals to use the profits generated from billions of euros of frozen Russian assets to help provide weapons and other funds for Ukraine. And those proposals have gathered steam as American efforts to secure military funding have stalled in Congress. Croatia's ruling conservatives have won a hotly contested parliamentary election, but without a majority will need support from far-right groups to stay in power. The governing HDZ, led by Prime Minister Andrej Plenković, took 60 seats in the 151-seat parliament. In his victory speech, he said his party will begin the tough process of talks to pull together a parliamentary majority to form his third government.
Čvrste političke stabilnosti, odmah što prije formiranje nove parlamentarne većine i konstituiranje Hrvatskog sabora i formiranje nove vlade, jer samo na taj način u ovako zahtjevnim i bitno izmijenjenim geopolitičkim okolnostima u kojima se svijet, Europa i Hrvatska nalazi, možemo zajamčiti kvalitetnu budućnost i u socijalnom i u gospodarskom smislu za hrvatske građane.
A centre-left coalition headed by the Social Democrats and unofficially led by the populist President Zoran Milanovic won 42 seats.
Ovi rezultati sigurno nisu onakvi kakve smo svi mi priželjkivali. Ali isto tako, ovi rezultati su pokazali da 2/3 građanki i građana Hrvatske želi promjenu. 2/3 hrvatskih ljudi nije zadovoljno sa onime što se u Hrvatskoj događa, što u Hrvatskoj vide.
The nationalist right-wing Homeland Movement Party came in third with 14 seats and is expected to play a significant role in coalition talks. The election, which brought a record 60% of eligible voters to the polls, followed a campaign that centred on a bitter rivalry between the president and the prime minister.
If Ukraine falls, it could lead to World War III. That's the warning the country's Prime Minister, Denis Shmyhal, gave ahead of the US Congress's long-stalled vote on foreign aid on Saturday. Ukraine's President Zelensky maintains air defences are a top priority after 3 Russian missiles killed at least 17 people in Chernihiv on Wednesday.
Підкреслив сьогодні все те, що необхідно для наших подальших дій, для нашого захисту, звичайно, ППО і фронт. Це ключовий пріоритет. Зараз такий час, який треба усім в Європі, у вільному світі використати заради зміцнення, заради більшого виробництва зброї, заради більшого постачання зброї, загалом, заради рішучості. На рішучості тримається нормальне життя світу.
Moving to Prague, dozens of people gathered in front of the US, German and French embassies on Wednesday, urging NATO allies to close the airspace over Ukraine. This amid another warning from Sweden's foreign minister that Russia is sailing unseaworthy oil ships through the Baltic Sea.
EU leaders say they're working on the urgent needs of Ukrainian defence amid a wide-scale rise in Russian military attacks across the country. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky joined leaders via video link as part of a two-day summit in Brussels, where he described the spectre of Russian cruise missiles killing Ukrainian civilians, including children. He called on the EU to step in immediately to support Ukraine, the way countries intervened to support Israel when it came under attack from Iran.
This is not a question of months, it's a question of days and weeks. It is very important that we deliver on our promises, and I can reassure you that all the stakeholders, all the actors, they are doing everything which is possible to speed up, to make more efforts. If it is possible, also to use more the stocks that are available, especially in the field of the air defense systems.
EU member states also agreed on the need for restraint and de-escalation in the Middle East and for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and humanitarian aid to reach starving people and for all hostages to be released.
We call on all the parties to exercise the utmost restraint. This is a very clear signal, and this is really our common position. This is a very clear signal that we want to send.
Brussels is aware of the threatening geopolitical situations in Ukraine and the Middle East. But today they'll be discussing something closer to home, how to revitalise the single market and protect European economies amid a future of foreseeable tensions. Shona Murray, Euronews, Brussels.
Russia's begun to withdraw its peacekeepers from Azerbaijan's Karabakh region, where they've been stationed since the end of the war in 2020. Azerbaijan said their presence was superfluous after the country regained full control of the region last year. The peacekeepers' duties had included ensuring free passage on the sole road connecting Karabakh with Armenia. But Azerbaijan began blocking the road in late 2020, alleging Armenians were using it for weapons shipments and to smuggle minerals. It said Russian forces did not intervene to prevent this.
Interest in the elections of the European Parliament is gradually rising, according to the latest edition of the Eurobarometer. This survey shows that 60% of EU citizens are either very interested or somewhat interested in the June elections. By contrast, 40% are not very interested or not at all interested. 71% of participants also say they are likely to cast a vote to elect their representatives in Brussels, a 10-point increase since 2019. The unpredictable state of global affairs appears to weigh heavily. 81% of citizens say the current international context makes voting even more important. Also on voters' mind is the cost of living crisis, the fight against poverty, public health, and the creation of new jobs are the top 3 priorities for Europeans. Another highlight from the Eurobarometer is the perception of the Parliament itself. 40% of citizens say they have a positive image of the hemicycle, which is the only EU institution directly elected. Meanwhile, 40% say their view is neutral and only 18% say it's negative. This marks the first time that the positive perception outweighs the neutral perception. The Eurobarometer will be the last to be released before the elections, scheduled to be held between June 6 and 9.
An attempt to stop the National Conservatism Conference in Brussels has drawn criticism and condemnation. On Tuesday, local mayor Emir Kia ordered police to shut it down to preserve public safety 3 hours after it had begun. Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo described that decision as unacceptable. The order was later quashed by the Belgian Council of State. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, French politician Eric Zemmour and the UK's Nigel Farage were among those attending the far-right event. In a post on X, Farage said the shutdown order was made to silence free speech.
We rented a place in Budapest, and just several hours prior to the meeting, it was said that unfortunately it's not available anymore. And then we looked for another one, and they said that if the runner of the place would supply us with some beer and some food, he will be out of the business, you know. So the same kind of pressure technologies which you have experienced here was very common in the second part of the 80s in Hungary.
Some analysts say the move to suspend the conference could bolster support for the far right. The event draws together advocates of national sovereignty.
Of course, this action can be considered as something that can rather help the far right than destabilize them, because we of course know that the far right thrives on a victimization discourse. They always try to say that the establishment wants to prevent them from saying what they think.
The incident has triggered fresh debate in Belgium about political tolerance. Emir Kier had said some people attending the conference held anti-gay and anti-abortion views. Prime Minister De Croo posted on X that banning political meetings is unconstitutional.
In Francophone Belgium, they go a bit further. There they also have what we call a cordon médiatique. So that also means that the representatives of the radical right, the extreme right, are not allowed to speak in the classical media. That is something that does not exist in the north of the country anymore.
The two-day event finished with a discussion on the future of conservatism in Europe and the challenges that lie ahead.